What do you say we talk about organic nutrients and mulches and fertilizers and all that kind of stuff? And um, let me give you a kind of some basic sort of first principles to work everything out from, so that well, you can watch these YouTube videos and they want you to bury charred wood and toilet paper rolls in your garden and all this, and pour vinegar next to the plants, and you're going to get some magic effect by I don't know what. They're just all these things that they're going to okay, just so that I'm not going to start an argument with any of these people. But let me just say this. Chemical fertilizers do not do the same thing as organics because they're chemical salts. And that means that, yes, I will use a very light application of a water mix, NPK plus micronutrients type of fertilizer on container plants where the soil is probably kind of depleted, or when I'm wanting a lot of growth, like when you're growing stuff in cell packs, professionals always use those water mix fertilizers. They usually put them in proportional mixers that put the stuff in all the time. But you don't go crazy with it, you're just trying to give the plants a little boost. Now, the things that a plant needs, right, is nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And then there's micronutrients like copper, magnesium, zinc, and so on, so on, so on. And those things will be, for the most part, are going to be in your compost, but not necessarily all of them. You may, if you have compost that's from something that's zinc deficient, then you're not going to have zinc in your compost. And if you knew that particular thing, then you could just buy some chemical zinc and and put a handful of it in every cubic yard of your compost and take care of that. Otherwise, it is good to just use to build your compost out of stuff that's like all different kind of things. Wood ash has a lot of nutrients in it, so it's a good thing to use, but it can be alkaline, and wood ash is tremendously variable, so the composition of wood ash, if you see somebody quoting that, it's just going to be some kind of an average figure that they've come up with, and it's not going to be everybody's answer to what's in the stuff that comes out of my wood stove. But if you don't burn, like, even lumber, they can put arsenic on. So if you don't burn lumber, painted wood, it's just stuff with anything on it. If you're just burning like natural logs, then you can use those ashes in your. I just dump them on the vegetable garden and run them in with the tandem disc. I don't even worry about if it's evenly distributed. I just throw it wherever there's space at the present time, because they're all minerals. They're going to go into the ground, and the microbes are going to take them up, and I'm not trying to control everything. Wood and this charring business. Okay, all of the organic matter that you're likely to be putting in your compost is mostly carbon chains. If you take 6 carbons and throw a bunch of hydrogens around them, that's glucose or fructose with sugars. If you put the two of those together, that's sucrose, cane sugar, so that's a C12. And then if you keep on putting them together, you get a starch, and then eventually you'll come to cellulose. And as you're looking at the trees and the fibers of plants, basically most structural stuff in plants is made pretty much of cellulose, which doesn't have any plant nutrients in it really. Plants photosynthesize the carbon out of carbon dioxide in the air, so they don't need that. The thing that's good about decomposing cellulose is that it feeds like all the microbes and fungi and worms and burrowing whatevers that are in there, loosening up your soil and making everything all nice. But they're not, your plants aren't using that stuff. So in the case of a piece of wood, you don't need to char it. If you char it, then use it in your barbecue. You got some charcoal. When you're done with it and you've burned it down to ashes, you've still got all the minerals that were in there. You know, roughly speaking, you do. I mean, some of them flash and stuff, but basically all the minerals that are in a log are still there after you burn it for ashes. So use it to heat your house, use it to barbecue your steak or whatever, if you can afford a steak anymore. And whatever you can do. And then just put those ashes out. And you could mix some ash in your compost. You don't want to go crazy on it because of pH. But, you know, a yard of compost and a shovel full of ashes is going to be alright. Now, all the other stuff that you're putting out there, I don't care whether it's a fish carcass or bones or whatever. Bones have a lot of phosphorus in them. That's why you have bone meal. All of that stuff has got the phosphorus and potassium, especially. Nitrogen, legumes can put in, so nitrogen's a kind of a special case. For the most part, if you're growing stuff like beans and peas in a garden, then you're probably not really going to need to worry at all about getting nitrogen into it, unless you have like, if you have grass someplace and it's coming up all like yellow, then you may need nitrogen. But you can see this stuff now, it's well below freezing out there. I know it's a very pretty day, and the birds are happy because I put out some of the oil sunflower seeds, the black oil ones. But it's really cold out there, and I think it's like 20 degrees or something. So look at that grass. That grass isn't being fertilized. The only nitrogen that I normally put on into the soil around here myself is urine, and you can probably guess how I apply that. Don't apply it right next to a plant. But you can do it. You can definitely put it in your compost pile. The more salt you eat, the more salinity it'll have. So that means, depending on the salt tolerance of what you're growing, tomatoes, no worries. They're highly salt tolerant, but some things like, it looks to me like kale is not very salt tolerant because my gypsum water seems to kill them off, unfortunately as heck. But that's the deal with urine anyway. It's mostly nitrogen, but it's also, if you take a vitamin pill and your vitamins, if you get the multi mineral vitamin, the big fat tablets, and I mean, why take vitamins if you're not going to take the ones that have all the minerals? The idea is you don't know for sure what you might be short on. Well, a bunch of those are water soluble, which means you'll pee them out. And so if you do that onto the ground, then those nutrients will be taken up. And it seems to me like rather than using a bunch of water, which represents energy and then uses up water, of course, that it's better to just go out in the yard somewhere and you can go anywhere in the inside of the drip line of a large tree, and I mean the tree is not going to be it's not going to get too much nitrogen by it. It would take a heroic amount to hurt that tree. And then the nutrients it takes up will become its leaves, and you can use those leaves for mulch. Now, I'm not saying there's no use in putting down compost and digging it in, or I'm just going to say plowing it in. You see Mr. Ford 8N over there in the picture with that tandem disc. He can go actually faster than I can run, being old and decrepit, and go 6 inches deep into the soil and stir it up like a rototiller, only he does about 6 feet, 7 feet wide at a time, and a couple passes, and it's just all, the weeds are just destroyed. So, if possible, if you really wanted to do any kind of serious vegetable gardening, what you'd want is like a community garden where somebody's got a tractor, and so you can get in and I'll go out there and I can do like 70 feet of the vegetable garden there in like just 1 or 2 minutes, and back up and do it again, and about 3 passes over it, and it's just completely demolished, and it would take me 2-3 hours to do that with the rototiller. If I could even, maybe it would take longer than that. And the rototiller doesn't get deep everywhere. If you could lift up the soil that a rototiller has loosened and look at what's underneath it, it would be all wavy with bumps and holes, and it's, because the things go up and down and all around, and rototillers are alright for a flower bed, but I mean, if you're going to grow food, you want to grow enough that there's like something to eat. And if you don't have a big enough garden to do that, and you're just using a little flower bed, then I don't know, grow a tomato bush if your climate permits them, or grow your favorite herbs and stuff like that. But do the stuff essentially the highest value per square foot things that you can grow, with value being determined by what they're worth to you. So moving on, instead of just plowing, if you want to loosen the soil, put sand in it and then plow the sand in. If you want to feed compost to the soil, you really don't need to dig it in. In a lot of ways, it's better to use it as a mulch, because the mulch is going to keep a lot of the tiny weed seeds from ever even sprouting. This last year I did my zucchinis. I'm old enough now that they've moved the ground a long ways down. I can barely reach it anymore. And I just can't I can't do, even going and sitting on a bucket with my little short-handled hoe is tough. Getting back up off the bucket's the hard part. So I just want, I just can't get in, nobody seems to want to help and do some weeding and join in on the eating, which I would think would be a pretty good deal, but nobody nobody does. So uh, this last summer I did my zucchinis. I grew them in 3-inch pots in the 10-20 flats, and I started fertilizing them when they were like already pretty big for even being in those pots anymore, and requiring once or even twice a day watering. And fertilized them light, but I just kept them moving a little bit. And then I put down, I plowed the ground, and then I put down landscape fabric, and and then I just raked up all my leaves from everywhere I could find them, and twigs, and I've got a little micro chipper with a 3/4 horse electric motor on it, which is good for chopping up big leaves and twigs and stuff. It's twigs the size of a pencil. It eats them up pretty quick. The bigger stuff, it's just throw it in and listen to it go bang, 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 and it makes more sense with that larger stuff to just cut it to like, you know, lengths, firewood lengths, and um, put it in an oil drum or something like that, and use it for kindling next winter, and you know, forget trying to chip that kind of stuff. Unless, of course, you got the big chipper, in which case I would throw much larger stuff in it. And, well, you can screen the coarse material out of what comes out of a real brush chipper. I mean, one with a, with an automobile size engine on it. Maybe, it's 200 or 300 cubic inch engine. Well, those things will spit the stuff out. You put it on like you put some maybe like 1x2 utility mesh fencing over a frame, so that you've made something that looks a lot like a gate for a fence, and then set that up on something like cinder blocks or buckets or whatever, and you throw all the stuff on top of it and push it around a little bit, and then scoop up the big things that didn't go through the screen and use them. And what does go through the screen is excellent for the compost, and it won't. Rototiller doesn't even know what to do with it. It gets these 6-inch chunks that have come through a real brush clipper, and it just can't even swallow one of those things. So. So that's a problem there. It's not a problem for Mr. Tractor over there. He just goes right over it. Boom. The stuff is gone. Now, when you look at the materials that you're going to put in your compost and how you're going to build the pile and all that, all you need is a heap of stuff that's damp, and it's gonna compost. If it's real high in carbon, like if sawdust or something, it won't compost very well unless you add some nitrogen. And I took some chipped brush once, and I had about a 3-yard pile, I guess, or something, maybe 4. That's like a 5-foot high heap dumped out of a dump truck. And I wanted it to heat, so what I did was I got it wet, and then I threw like 5 pounds of urea, which, yeah, is a chemical. It's a chemical salt, onto it, and ran some water onto it to dissolve the urea and make it soak down into the pile. And then I put that black plastic over the pile and put bricks all around on the ground. And that's the only time I've ever gotten up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit inside the pile. But, I mean, that just demolished that chipped brush. Otherwise, most of the compost that I've used, when I was younger, I was doing landscaping, and I used to get um, planer chip is what you really call it. The wood sawdust, but it's curlings like it come from a plane, and that comes out of the lumber mill, of course. And they put that in the stalls of horses, and the horses pee on it and drop their manure in it, and then they take that out and throw it away. It's a way of keeping the horses' stalls cleaner. Give the horses, it's much better for a horse to have a bedding down there than to be on the bare, squishy, icky, nasty, wet mud. That's not really much of a way to treat your four-footed friend there. And horses are pretty neat animals. They're pretty nice, and they don't mind helping us work. You know, they seem to kind of like it. They don't. That doesn't bend them out of shape. They want their apples and their attention, and they want to be in on what's going on, just kind of like a dog does. So anyway, I'd go out to the stable and get that stuff, and then I'd wet it a little bit and add some chicken manure to make it heat good, and use that as a mulch. I'd pile up like 6 inches deep, and just everything grows great. Here, I don't have access to that sort of a bedding, and my back's kind of like decided that I'm about done with my manure shoveling for a lifetime. So what I do have is I can still rake up leaves, and I can still collect the stuff with I put the catch bag on the mower, and instead of raking the leaves, you just mow the grass area and get the grass and the leaves and let them be chopped up together and mixed. Which makes a much better compost than fooling around mixing stuff with a pitchfork, which I don't turn piles ever. I never was much for it, and I don't do it at all anymore. I just take the part I want out of it. If the some of it, the stuff looks like too dry and new, I just push it over out of my way, and I dig out the stuff I want, and then I throw more stuff on the pile, and I don't worry about it. Anyway, I put the landscape fabric down for the zucchinis, and I put, like a circle of leaves around each zucchini where there was a space in the landscape between the two strips of landscape fabric. And then I put leaves on the landscape fabric to keep it from getting in the sun and being deteriorated. And I weighed it down with some like logs and stuff, and you can use gallon milk jugs full of water or rocks or bricks or whatever. But like a log is about the best thing, because when you come through with a tractor, if you have forgotten stuff, well, you can run right over a log. It's not going to hurt anything. But you don't want like bricks, or if the milk jugs, they get brittle in the sun, so there's a point where you have to get them thrown away, because otherwise you'll have microplastics in your soil. So anyway, there's all that. But those zucchinis did really well, and I've just come to thinking I can't get anybody to help me weeding. I can't do it by myself. I want to grow a lot of stuff. So this next spring, I'm going to unroll like the 6-foot landscape fabric in 50-foot sections, and I'm going to unroll it on top of a soaker hose that's already laid down where I've just plowed. And then I'll weight it down, and then I'm going to come in and put my zucchinis in. I'll just cut a little L with a razor blade and open that flap up and plant the zucchini through that hole, and then fold the flap down kind of right up against the base of the zucchini plant, and then I'll make a circle of leaves around it, all carefully arranged compost, and then like on the outskirts of it, I'm just going to put all the raked up leaves I can, and hopefully cover all of my landscape fabric, keep all of it out of the sun. And I don't want to look at it anyway. It's like a plastic, rough gunny sack made out of plastic kind of stuff. That's sort of what it's like. And obviously you don't want to put that, you don't want that getting mixed into your soil, so at some point you're going to roll it up in the fall and decide that it's just coming apart too bad to be used again. And unfortunately there's no way to recycle it here, so it's just going in the landfill. But well, okay, so a little bit of plastic. I think 50 feet of that stuff only weighs about like 6 or 8 pounds, so it's not a whole bunch of plastic. But anyway, that's how I'm going to do it. I know that works really well. And it's kind of a substitute for my old method of just piling up the mulch, which I wouldn't bother with the landscape fabric if I had enough composted sawdust. I would just pile up 6 inches deep and keep those weeds down, because we have like public enemy number one is the so-called careless weed or pigweed. The thing will grow 6 feet tall easily, and it has a very small seed which it drops all over the place, and you'll see it coming up in the spring if you have like some disc down ground and it gets wetted. They'll come up. I mean, there'll be a plant every half inch. But all I can say is, hello, Mr. Tandem Disc, because anything under about a 3 or 4 inch weed is just instantly trashed. But you really can't. I suppose if I had the right cultivators and if I could keep the tractor going straight enough not to knock my crops down, yeah, you can pretty well weed in the center with cultivation and then just come back with a hoe and do the corners. They do that with cotton, but for the most part, most of the food that you buy has all kinds of residues of like Roundup on it. And they even spray it on wheat 10 days before harvesting. So if you ask yourself, well, is it worth getting out and cutting wheat with a sickle and putting it over your wheelbarrow and pounding on it with a stick in order to get some organic wheat berries? Maybe so. Maybe so. I'm doing a little of that this year. I've got a stand of winter wheat back there. It's not very big, but 1 grain of wheat produces a whole bunch of heads, So you get yourself a pound of wheat, and you can turn that into a pretty dang large amount of stuff. Well, I was going to talk about the fertilizers more, and I've already spent a bunch of time. Hopefully the birds are more entertaining than looking at somebody's face, especially somebody as ugly as me. So look at the nutrients that are actually in the stuff that you're using, and some basics. If you're a barbecuer, when you get done barbecuing, one thing you can do, well, you've eaten these pork ribs, say, take those pork ribs and throw them back in the barbecue on the coals. And if the coals aren't hot enough to cook the bones, the next time you go and put some mesquite sticks in there, briquettes are like a foreign object. I can't imagine using briquettes. The next time I build a fire, uh,